Welcome to NTD News. I'm Holly Kellum. Here are today's top stories. In the latest Democratic debate, 12 candidates duked it out on stage in Ohio last night. Hot topics included health care and gun control, with one candidate saying guns would be taken by force. A U.S. national security advisor flying to Turkey's capital today for emergency talks about Turkey's offensive into northern Syria. This comes as Turkey refuses U.S. calls for a ceasefire. The House passed a bill condemning Chinese interference in Hong Kong's affairs. The bill also provides for pro-democracy protesters. And a new state record, one pumpkin is declared the heaviest in the world champion pumpkin weigh-offs. Find out the grower's secret to raising the winning pumpkin. Twelve Democrats packed a debate stage in the key battleground state of Ohio last night. It was the party's fourth presidential debate. Candidates touched on a range of issues from health care to gun control.
Following a heart attack last month, Senator Bernie Sanders worked to convince spectators and debate moderators that he is still healthy. Defending his age, he invited onlookers to his next major rally in Queens, New York, saying his vigorous campaign would prove his stability. Amid the Democrat-led impeachment inquiry into President Trump and the investigation into the Biden family's foreign dealings, former Vice President Joe Biden was asked to explain himself. When asked why it was okay for his son to engage in foreign business dealings while Biden was still in office, he sidestepped the issue, vehemently denying any wrongdoing by his son, and instead tried to focus on his view that President Trump should be removed from office.
My son did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. I carried out the policy of the United States government in rooting out corruption in Ukraine.
America's Second Amendment right also proved a hot debate topic when former Rep. Beto O'Rourke said that guns will be taken from people who don't follow his proposed plan to outlaw AR-15s and AK-47s. O'Rourke noted that the police might need to be involved, explaining that following his proposed government buybacks, if someone brandishes the weapon in public, it would be taken from them. Senator Elizabeth Warren also came under attack, pressed on how she'd pay for Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan.
Let me be clear on this. Costs will go up for the wealthy. They will go up for big corporations. I will not sign a bill into law that does not lower costs for middle-class families.
But her moderate rivals were unsatisfied with her answer. Mayor Pete Buttigieg saying her signature is to have a plan for everything except health care. Qualifying candidates will have another opportunity to grow support for their platforms next month on November 20th, when the fourth Democratic debate will be held in Atlanta, Georgia.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi told reporters last night that the House will not take a formal vote to start impeachment proceedings. This comes after the White House told legislators it won't comply with the impeachment investigation unless the House takes a formal vote. But Pelosi and House Democrats say it isn't needed to start the impeachment process. Enough Democrats have pledged support for impeachment, though, that it would likely pass in the House if it were voted on. Also yesterday, Vice President Mike Pence declined a subpoena for records for the impeachment inquiry. Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, also said he doesn't intend to comply with a congressional records request. A U.S. national security advisor flew to Turkey's capital today for emergency talks to halt the Turkish assault on northern Syria. The meeting comes ahead of Vice President Mike Pence and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's arrival tomorrow.
U.S. officials are trying to broker a ceasefire and dissuade Turkey from attacking Kurdish territory as fighting continues in northern Syria. Turkish soldiers fired howitzers at a Syrian border town, defying warning from the U.S., which levied sanctions on Turkey on Monday. Syria's army, backed by Russian forces, has moved into the city of Manbij after a U.S. military withdrew earlier this week. Turkey has so far refused U.S. calls for a ceasefire and has demanded a 20-mile safe zone to protect itself from the Kurdish YPG militia, which it considers a terrorist organization. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan says Turkey will not stop until Kurdish fighters retreat from the area.
Bunun için de teklifimiz
Our proposal to stop the issue in Syria in the quickest way is for all terrorists to drop their weapons, destroy their traps, and withdraw outside of the safe zone we determined by tonight. Erdogan said Trump approved the safe zone, but Trump said he never endorsed the plan.
President Trump late last night vetoed a joint resolution that would overturn his national emergency declaration to obtain border wall funding. This is the second time Trump has issued a veto related to the same emergency declaration. He said the national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border continues to threaten national security and that the border is still a major entry point for criminals, human trafficking, gang members, and drugs. The Senate is likely to vote on overturning Trump's veto this week. U.S. Commerce Secretary Wilbur said that heavy U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports are what brought China to the table last week to secure a preliminary trade agreement.
I believe that China came to the negotiations mainly because we imposed substantial tariffs on them.
On Tuesday, Ross talked about the first phase of a trade deal the U.S. and China agreed to last week. He believes that U.S. tariffs have had a direct impact on Chinese manufacturers and made many U.S. companies accelerate moving their supply chain out of China.
There are some short-term costs associated with this shift, but there are much greater long-term potential and probable gains.
Experts believe that unequal trade and China's alleged theft of U.S. intellectual property has challenged U.S. national security and economic stability. One of the sticking points in the trade agreement has been around enforcing penalties for this type of theft.
An authoritarian government that has very consciously used its authority domestically to regulate aspects of the economy that have an impact on national security, to facilitate espionage efforts and cyber espionage.
The preliminary U.S.-China trade deal has been agreed to, but has not yet been put in writing. Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping are expected to sign the final trade agreement during the APEC summit next month. Whether the U.S. will impose a new round of tariffs on China starting December 15th is still unknown. Reporting by Katie Wong, NTD News.
And in Hong Kong today, pro-democracy lawmakers protested leader Carrie Lam's policy speech, which she postponed, then published online. In her speech, she notably didn't offer a direct olive branch to the protesters.
Hong Kong's protests moved inside the city's legislature on Wednesday. Pro-democracy lawmakers called out the protests' rallying cry, 5 demands, not one less, to the city's least popular leader, Carrie Lam. Her annual policy address was adjourned twice and then cancelled in an unprecedented move. Lam later put out a pre-recorded version instead. The address was aimed at restoring confidence in her Beijing-backed administration. In her policy statement, Lam was unapologetic about her government's response to the protests and rejected 2 of the protesters' 5 demands, amnesty for those charged and universal suffrage. Back in the legislature, some lawmakers renewed their calls for Lam to resign.
And I really urge her, if she can't govern Hong Kong, and she has no determination to govern Hong Kong, and she has no ability, and even incapable in administrating Hong Kong, please step down.
When this government has lost all merits and all legitimacy, there's no way how Carrie Lam could govern this Hong Kong anymore.
Lam spoke hours after the U.S. House of Representatives passed 4 pieces of legislation taking a hard line on China, 3 related to pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong. One of the measures, the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, would require the U.S. Secretary of State to certify every year whether Hong Kong had retained its autonomy, in order for the city to keep receiving its special treatment from the U.S. as a major financial center. Lam has condemned the U.S. Congress for meddling in foreign affairs, while Beijing is threatening to retaliate if the U.S. enacts the Hong Kong bill.
The House passed that act yesterday, which condemns Chinese interference in Hong Kong's affairs and supports the rights of pro-democracy protesters to demonstrate. Congressman Chris Smith has introduced the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act 4 times since 2014, and he's the primary sponsor of H.R. 289. The bill had a vote on the floor of the House of Representatives.
The free world is looking to us for leadership, and that's why I thank my friend from New Jersey, Mr. McGovern, Mr. Sherman, for supporting these legislations. The protesters want to know if our support for democracy is merely
And yesterday, a Texas Supreme Court struck down an Obama-era regulation that forced doctors to perform gender transition surgeries. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on the nationwide policy change.
Beckett Fund headed the lawsuit and called the Texas judge's ruling a victory for the conscience rights of doctors. Under the transgender mandate, doctors, regardless of their religious beliefs and medical judgment, would be forced to provide potentially dangerous gender transition surgeries. If they didn't, they risked losing their jobs.
Today's ruling is huge because the regulation at issue applies to virtually every doctor and hospital in the country.
Doctors would also be made to operate on children, but according to data collected by Beckett, 94% of children grow out of gender dysphoria.
And there are multiple studies showing that some of these transgender medical procedures can actually cause harm. So the doctors in these cases are saying, don't force us to violate the Hippocratic Oath. We want to serve patients and we want to do no harm.
People seeking gender transition services will still be able to receive them from willing doctors. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The Trump administration is proposing opening more than 180,000 acres of the country's largest national forest for logging. On Tuesday, the Agricultural Department unveiled a proposal for the Tongas National Forest. It would allow for road construction and reclassifying forest areas. The forest includes over 150,000 acres of old-growth cedar, hemlock, and spruce. The Tongas National Forest is in the panhandle of southeastern Alaska. It's about the size of West Virginia and is a habitat for bears, eagles, and salmon. The department said the proposal will be published this week. It's in the form of a draft environmental impact statement. It will be open for public comment. Cuba said yesterday it plans to allow some stores to sell domestic appliances and other goods in U.S. dollars. This comes as the country struggles to deal with a black market of so-called mules who purchase goods abroad to sell door to door.
Cuba's inefficient state-run economy is facing a crisis due to the implosion of ally Venezuela's economy and the tightening of the decades-old U.S. trade embargo. Vice President Salvador Valdez Mesa said the proposal is to start the sale of the most in-demand products. He said 77 stores across the country would begin selling appliances and other goods for dollars at the end of the month. These items will be imported and their purchase will be via magnetic cards. And the economy minister said Tuesday they are trying to find a way for this idea to work.
We're going to work on sales and not on prohibition. We need to find mechanisms that give a response to the demand that exists today in the country from a segment of the population that is acquiring these products via importation as a result of a deficit in the sales of these products in our market.
Currently, possession of the dollar and other tradable currencies is legal, but they have previously not been deemed legal tender for purchases. The government said that people may obtain those tradable currencies through offshore remittances or by other means such as exchanging local pesos on the street. The government claims a convertible peso is equal to the dollar, but imported appliances and other goods, when available, have huge markups as they are purchased in tradable currencies, while the peso and convertible peso have no value abroad. NTD News.
In a state-run media report from North Korea, the regime's leader Kim Jong-un is pictured riding on a white horse in a sacred mountain. The report cites his aides as saying they're convinced he's planning what they called a great operation.
In what North Korea called a defiant message, new state media photos show Kim Jong-un riding alone up a sacred mountain, astride a white horse. These epic images ran alongside a gushing state media report that cited Kim aides saying they're convinced Kim is planning a, quote, great operation. The mountain is Mount Paektu, a symbolic and spiritual location wrapped up in the origins of the Kim dynasty. KCNA said Kim's ride was a great event of weighty importance in the history of the Korean Revolution. It's not clear what the great operation might be, but state media often features mountain visits before major decisions. Last year, during a historic summit, Kim took South Korea's president to the top of Paektu. Analysts say his latest ride up the mountain could symbolize Kim's standing up to pressure over the North's nuclear program. Kim has said he's only giving the United States until year's end to loosen its stance on the North shedding its nuclear weapons. If not, he says Pyongyang will pursue a new path forward.
Up next, France's finance minister warning that the EU will retaliate if the U.S. goes ahead with its proposed tariffs. The tariffs are set to take effect later this week and are worth billions. Find out more after the break.
This is extremely gutsy. The Chinese Communist Party is not known for taking criticism very well.
The police have blocked off the streets and been firing tear gas and beanbag rounds at the protesters, and they've made several arrests.
警方呢是一直进行了一些推进，并且呢是多次舉起黑旗和橙旗呢，去發射了很多的催淚彈。
即係佢哋放出去打嗰時，嘭咁撞到個肚㗎。咁咧就我而家翻轉頭咧見到個咁嘅嘢，因為嗰時兵荒馬亂咧，我就。
That's the media liaison. They're telling us that we need to get out of here. They're telling the press to leave.
Boy, this tear gas is getting pretty strong.
France's finance minister warned today that France and the EU will retaliate if Washington goes ahead with proposed tariffs on EU goods.
Ahead of a meeting with U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer on Thursday, France Minister Bruno Le Maire warned that any tariffs would be a mistake. He said this will divide the U.S. and EU at a time when they should be unified. I would also like to say this simple thing again. If he goes ahead with this decision, we Europeans will undertake similar sanctions in a few months, maybe even harsher ones, within the framework of the WTO to retaliate to these U.S. sanctions. The tariffs are set to take effect October 18th. They will add 10% on EU-manufactured aircraft and 25% for everything else. Most of the tariffs apply to imports from France, Germany, Spain, and the UK. The targeted imports are worth $7.5 billion. Le Maire also said he believed there was a glimmer of hope that the EU and the UK could reach an agreement over the terms of Brexit.
Hundreds of surveillance cameras have been installed on the streets of Belgrade as part of a large-scale surveillance project. Some warn it's a way to threaten anti-government protesters and could infringe on citizens' privacy.
Local authorities argue the system, created by Chinese telecommunications giant Huawei, helps reduce crime in Serbia's capital of 2 million. Critics say it erodes personal freedoms, makes political opponents vulnerable to retribution, and even exposes the country's citizens to snooping by the Chinese government. Serbia's former Commissioner for Personal Data Protection said the country has had a bad experience with government abuse of citizen data. The data has been brutally abused on several occasions and used against the regime critics or opponents, although that is strictly forbidden and punishable by law, even as a criminal act. Groups opposed to Serbia's president say police are leaking footage of protests to pro-government tabloid media to intimidate participants. Serbian police deny any such abuse. The populist Serbian regime has been keen to develop closer ties with China. The country's fragile democracy allows China's economic interests to grow almost unchecked, with issues like human rights, environmental standards, or transparency often overlooked. Public authorities have disclosed little about how the cameras work. A human rights group set up a tent in Belgrade to engage with pedestrians and ask whether they know they are being watched.
We are asking where are those cameras, where are they hidden, how much we paid for them, and what's going to happen with information which are collected after this surveillance.
The surveillance system will eventually encompass 1,000 cameras at 800 locations throughout Belgrade.
Up next, a strange case in the Netherlands as police uncover a family locked away in isolation for nearly a decade. See what neighbors are saying, that and more after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format, where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled, and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
The lasting beauty of traditional oil painting, realistic style, brilliant, moving, expressive. 2019 NTD Television International Competition for Figure Painting in Oil, guided by truthfulness, kindness, and beauty. We invite you to join us on our journey back to traditional art. Gold Prize award of $10,000. For more detail, please visit oilpainting.ntdtv.com.
Tiger Woods may be trading the golf club for a pen, at least for a little while. The 15-time major champ says he's working on writing a memoir that will provide the definitive story of his life. HarperCollins has the rights to the book. It will contain stories about his initial rise to stardom, dealing with injuries, his personal issues, and his comeback, winning the Masters in April. According to Woods, the book will be made up of his words and his thoughts. There's no word on when the book will be released, though. Woods will return to his day job, golfing, later this month at a skins game in Japan. He'll also take part in the PGA Tour's latest event, the Zozo Championship, on October 24th. And in the Netherlands, a bizarre story is emerging as Dutch police uncover a family hidden away on a remote farm for nearly a decade.
Police found a father and his 5 adult children, aged between 18 and 25, after the eldest son turned up in a local town. None of the family had been registered as residents there. Police are now questioning the man who paid the rent on the farmhouse. Local residents were surprised when they heard a family was living there.
We didn't know anything about this family. I didn't know anything about the existence of the family. We only found out yesterday what happened here, and then we found out that there was a man who rented this place.
Another resident who lives near the farm said she had never been able to make contact with the man. We tried to get in touch. My husband only last week tried with the man in the car, but then it was yes, no, and then he drove on. He locked the fences on his property after he passed through them. Police said they found the family in a small space in the house which could be locked, and that it was unclear whether they were being held against their will. According to local news reports, the family had been waiting for the end of time. Officials have not commented on whether the family may have held end-of-days apocalyptic beliefs. Meanwhile, the mayor said the children's mother is believed to have died before the family moved to the Dutch farm in 2010.
Up next, the biggest cruise ship ever to try to squeeze through a tiny canal in Greece. With just feet to spare, will the ship make it? Find out more when we return.
Our investigative reporters at the Epoch Times have spent 18 months uncovering the biggest political scandal in modern history. We connected the dots around Spygate, the actions by Obama-era officials against Trump's 2016 presidential campaign. Join me on Declassified as we bring you up-to-date developments on this unfolding scandal.
Viewers have described China Uncensored like The Daily Show, but about China.
At the beginning, I was super excited when I got 500 views, and now the show's grown to about 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. One episode reached 7.9 million people. I'm a little freaked out that many people have seen my face. In 5 years, I see China Uncensored as the sole source of edutainment worldwide.
And in Greece, a very wide ship passing through a very narrow canal with just feet to spare. According to Fred Olsen Cruise Line, the MS Braemar last week became the largest ship ever to pass through the Corinth Canal. The canal separates the Greek mainland from the Peloponnese Peninsula. It's 79 feet across, and the ship is 74 feet wide. Passengers paid a pretty penny to commemorate the record. The 25-day sailing trip through the Greek islands, Spain, and Portugal cost more than $5,500 per person. It was a breathtaking view and a close call. Passengers could almost touch the walls of the canal. What grows together goes together. A California man has won this year's Safeway World Championship Pumpkin Weigh-Off. His son-in-law took second place. NTD's Eileen Eng has their secret to success.
Is the last pumpkin of the day, folks.
On Monday, a new state record was set. At 2,175 pounds, the enormous pumpkin Leonardo Urena from Napa brought in was declared the heaviest. It broke the previous record for the heaviest pumpkin from California by about 37 pounds. For every pound of the pumpkin, the first place winner received $7. Urena received a check for over $15,000 and a green jacket that says 2019 Grand Champion Grower. He started growing it as a seed in April. It gained an average of 25 pounds per day. The secret to getting such a size:
try to apply organic fertilizers to grow giant pumpkins is important, because if you grow organically, they can make it all the way to the end.
He grows it in the open field in a Napa ranch with rich soil and abundant water, which he says are the perfect conditions for growing these giant gourds. His son-in-law, also from Napa, took second place. He said it's hard work to get them to that size.
500 gallons a day for 5 pumpkins. Yes, a lot of water.
Both are veteran giant pumpkin growers. What do they plan to do with the pumpkins now?
I'm going to sell a winery in Napa for exhibition. People can see the pumpkin every day if you're going to tasting rooms.
We're going to rent it or lease it to a restaurant, and then after Thanksgiving, we collect the seeds and dry them and pack them and send them to other growers, because we trade seeds with other growers around the world, and that's why we've been getting the best genetics in this sport.
There is certainly a magic of the pumpkin that I think just brings a smile to everyone's face. So, who doesn't love pumpkins?
The top winners will have their pumpkins displayed here in Half Moon Bay at the Pumpkin Festival next week. Eileen Ng, NTD News, Half Moon Bay, California.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Holly Kellum.